Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and I decided to get back on track with the promise that I laid out at the beginning of this year. Being as though it's 2024, it is the 40th year anniversary of 1984, if that makes any sense. It's been 40 years since 1984. And 1984 holds a special place in my heart. I've said it multiple times on this show. And I said that this year we were going to just go bananas with the 1984 references and movie reviews, retro reviews from that year, because so many epic films came out in 1984. I mean, we touched in on a few of them. We talked about the original Doom, which came out in 1984. The original Ghostbusters came out in 1984. We did a review of that. We just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the 40th year anniversary of the Terminator, the original Terminator. And there's been so many other films. I mean, think about it. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came out in 84. You also had Beverly Hills Cop, which we talked about as well, due to the release of Beverly Hills Cop Axel Foley, that came out over the summer. But the original came out in 84. Gremlins, The Karate Kid, Police Academy, Romancing the freaking Stone, man. They came out in 1984, and that's just to name a few. And I just love that year. I don't know why. It's something about 84. It's just something about it. Maybe it's because of my age. I was starting to come around to reality. I just turned 5, and so I'm looking around and seeing that, there's a world here, you know. and I kind of came into the world, even though I was 5 years old, being exposed to so much. I could start watching movies and start experiencing things that's going on around me. In 1984, you had the World's Fair come to New Orleans, and I remember this. I remember going to the World's Fair and thinking that this was a thing that we were going to get off, forever. And in the World's Fair never came back. But I don't even think they do it anymore, do they? I got to look that up. But a lot went on that year. Now, just this past week, at least the time of this recording, on November the 2nd, we marked the 40th year anniversary of a film that changed the course of history in some circles. I mean, it just changed horror films in a certain way. It's nothing innovative or new as far as slasher. We had slasher horror films prior to this, or before this. Halloween, Friday the 13th, things of that nature. So that wasn't new. But what was new was a killer who can get you in the most vulnerable state that you can possibly be in, your dreams, while you sleep. What can you do? Because everybody sleeps. Okay, you can get away from Jason Voorhees, just don't go to Camp Crystal Lake. You can get away from Mike Myers if you lock yourself in a room in your house on Halloween. But everybody, and I mean everybody, walking God's green earth, gotta go to sleep. And this is where the killer lurks, Freddy Krueger. We were introduced to one of the historic, infamous horror icons of all time on November the 2nd, 1984. And the film, written and directed by the late, great Wes Craven, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think this was probably my first horror film I ever watched as a kid. And of course, I had to sneak and watch it, or I think my either my sisters or my brother was watching it. I'm fuzzy on that part, but I know they were watching it, and I snuck in and watched it with them, and regretted it instantly. Instantly regretted it because what is this thing, man? This ain't a human being. I mean, you can, like I said, you can run from Jason Voorhees, even though he walks behind you and still catch you. You can manage to get away from Mike Myers, you know, and all that there, but Freddy, Freddy would get you. I mean, he will get you and get you in the most brutal fashion imaginable. And it just blew my mind. Certain scenes in here, certain things that happen throughout this film that has stuck with me for 40 years to this day. To this day, is certain moments like when I order a pizza and the sauce and the cheese kind of mixed together on there, and I can't eat it because it reminds me of Freddy Krueger's face. And to this day, it's hard for me to eat pizza. And now, for people who know me, may find that strange because they know that I would devour a Domino's pizza. But I I have a trick as to how I eat it. I don't look at it. I do not look at pizza when I eat it. It could be a live rat crawling on it, and I wouldn't know because I cannot look at it because it reminds me of the face of Freddy Krueger. To this day, we just ordered a pizza the other night, and it still, to this day, I cannot look at a pizza. And so this movie has affected me for 40 years, ruined my life, if you will. But I didn't let it win because I'm still eating the pizza, and I'm still going to sleep, even though it's tough at times. But Freddy Krueger, or A Nightmare on Elm Street, to put it more plainly, is a film, like I said, comes from the mind of the just horror legend, an icon in the genre, Wes Craven. And Wes Craven came up with the concept of this film because of a 1970s New York Times article about these refugees who fled to the United States because of war and genocide in I think Cambodia and Vietnam and all that, and they were suffering from nightmares, and it was, you know, PTSD in a sense, and they refused to go to sleep. And so some of the men died in their sleep soon after. They legitimately, you know, medical authorities called the phenomenon the Asian death syndrome. You probably know about it. If you don't, Google it up. Google it, because I had to Google it when I read this story. I was like, is this a real thing? Yes, it's a real thing. It's a condition affecting men between the age of 19 and 57 years of age. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Now, as far as the villain, Wes Craven came up with Freddy Krueger. He kind of drew it from his early life. One night when he was young, he saw this elderly man walking on, you know, the side path outside of his window. And the man stopped and glanced and, you know, kind of scared him, of course. Scared him and just walked off. And this served as the inspiration for Freddy Krueger. Initially, Freddy Krueger was intended to be a child molester, but he wasn't. Craven eventually characterized him as a child murderer to avoid being accused of exploiting, you know, that crime, I guess you could say. How much that affects, I don't know. Either way, he's exploiting it, but he stayed away from it. Now, in the remake with Charles Earl Haley playing Freddy Krueger, and I forgot who else was in that movie. It's a forgettable movie. But in the remake, they turned him into a child molester, and it just didn't work. It was stupid. I'm like, man, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't even add up. You know, as far as why Freddy Krueger is Freddy Krueger. But that's the remake. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the original. Um, Freddy's nature. Wes Craven stated that, in a sense, Freddy stands for the worst of parenthood and adulthood. The old dirty man, the nasty father, the adult who wants children to die rather than help them properly. He's the boogeyman. He's the worst fear of children. And so he looked at him as like this primal figure, sort of a devourer of children. Evil, twisted, a perverted father figure that wants to destroy and is able to get them in their most vulnerable moments. And that, of course, is when they're asleep. And so he took that, ran with that. By Wes Craven's account, coming up with the name of Fred Krueger was pretty easy for Wes Craven, because when he was younger, he was bullied at school by a child whose name was, wait for it, Fred Krueger. And so he he decided to use his childhood nemesis name as the name of this vile human being. Oh, is he human? I don't know. But the villain in this story as kind of a shot back at his childhood bully. And so Craven had done the same thing before. This ain't the first time when he puts in these little nuggets. In The Last House on the Left, film that he made in 1972, the villain's name was shortened to Krug. So the villain in The Last House on the Left name is Krug. It is short for Krueger. And he obviously Wes Craven did not let that go. He did not move past that as he got older. Wes Craven chose to make Freddy Krueger's sweater red and green after reading an article in 1982 that says that two colors were the most clash colors to the human retina, and that is red and green. And so that's why that went like that. So you can see that Wes Craven literally built this character from the ground up. Every aspect of Freddy Krueger was carefully constructed by Wes Craven, which all good filmmakers do. It's not unique to Wes Craven, but it is kind of funny to hear about for what would have been believed in 1984 as kind of a throwaway horror film. But no, not for Wes Craven. Wes Craven made a strong effort to make Freddy Krueger different from the other horror film villains in that time period. He said in an interview in 2014, a lot of the killers were wearing masks, like Leatherface, Michael Myers, Jason. I wanted my villain to have a mask, but be able to talk and taunt and threaten. So I thought of him being burnt and scarred. That was the mask. So he also said the killer should use something other than a knife, because it's too common. Mike Myers had the biggest knife you can think of in the kitchen. Jason Voorhees had the biggest knife there ever was in a machete. Leatherface had a whole chainsaw. So we needed something different. And instead of one knife, we got 5 knives on each finger with the glove. And so it was very cool how he constructed this character. The only thing left was the casting. And casting wasn't as easy as he thought. Now, he did get the actor he wanted. No, it's not the great Robert Englund, who played the character multiple times. It was David Warner. And David Warner, in case you don't know who that is a very distinguished actor. Up to that point, he had been in Omen. He was in Time Bandits. He was in Tron. He later on in life he did some voice acting. He was the voice of Ra's al Ghul on Batman the animated series. I mean, he has had a very uh accomplished career, and a very distinguished actor. I actually like him. I seen him in so many things, and he was good in everything. I think the first time I ever actually noticed him in something was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze. I think that was the first. That was my first time ever really paying attention to him. But he was cool in that. So ever since then, he's been cool with me. But it would have been very interesting to see him in this role. I mean, everything was set. He signed on. They did the makeup test with the burnt flesh and all this here, the costume fitting. Everything was a go. Then I guess he forgot, it slipped his mind. Wait, I'm shooting another movie at the same time, and we already started that, so I can't be in this movie. And so he had to drop out. And so they went to, in order to replace him, no, not Robert Englund. They went to Kane Hodder. And if you don't know who that is, he played another slasher in another slasher horror film, iconic slasher there it is, Jason Voorhees. And he was in heavy consideration, but didn't go through. They didn't see eye to eye. They being Kane and Wes Craven didn't see eye to eye on the development of the character, so he left the project. Then fate stepped in. Robert Englund came in to read for the role. Robert Englund was smaller than what Wes Craven had envisioned for this character. If you've seen David Warner, not a big guy. He's not muscular or nothing, but he's tall. Kind of lumbersome, and I think that would have been a cool visual effect with him. Him being that tall, towering over these teenagers. But Kane Hodder, you already know. Look at Jason Voorhees. He's huge, and so that would have been cool too. But Robert Englund was about 180 pounds soaking wet. He wasn't he wasn't going to intimidate anybody with his physique. And so Wes Craven was pretty hesitant with meeting with Robert Englund for the role of Freddy Krueger. But the struggle was killing him, because everybody they brought in to kind of test for the role, it just everybody was kind of caring to the children, or compassionate to the children, not really menacing. But Robert Englund walked in. Finally, Wes Craven agreed to meet with him, and he walked in, and like I said, he's a small guy, even short. He's a short guy. Nothing about him screams killer, and he literally took over the audition. He sold everybody. He gave 0 F's when it came to the kids. His delivery of the lines, he didn't care, and that won him the role. He went to dark places that Wes Craven wasn't expecting. The producers weren't expecting, and so he was immediately signed on to portray the legendary character of Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street. So that was set. The rest of the cast, this is where you kind of look back and you do some dream casting to see, I wonder how that would have looked, or how they would have did, or, so on and so forth. For the lead role of Nancy, we know that Heather Langenkamp, she was cast as Nancy, and the world is better for it, because she is amazing in that role. Loved her in that role. But other talented actresses auditioned for that role. To be exact, it was over 200 actresses auditioned for the role of Nancy Thompson. in the Nightmare on Elm Street. Just a few. You had Jennifer Grey. Yes, Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing and Red Dawn. Yeah, she auditioned. Demi Moore auditioned. Courtney Cox auditioned. Tracy Gold, from Growing Pains, she auditioned. It was a free for all. I mean, 200 actresses. I would imagine every young actress in Hollywood auditioned for the role. But in the end, Heather Langenkamp won the role. And even though you've never really seen her in much else, it's actually kind of a shock, coming out of that era. I thought she was really good, especially in, was it part three when she returned? In part three, I really enjoyed her in that. Part three is probably my favorite, spoiler, but part three is my favorite, all of them. But yeah, I hadn't really seen it, and she returned for that new Nightmare thing. But anywho's, she did a phenomenal job for the role of Glenn, who is the love interest of Nancy in the film. Uh, they had a good number of people as well to audition for this role. Number one, Mark Payton. Now, Mark Payton may not scream out to you, at least that name doesn't. But if you would have held on for a little while and watched A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, the lead in that film was played by Mark Payton. He played Jesse in that movie, but he originally auditioned for Glenn in the first movie. But he impressed them with their audition so much, they gave him the lead in the second movie. But he didn't get it in this first one. He shouldn't feel bad, because check out the names that auditioned for the role of Glenn in A Nightmare on Elm Street. You had John Cusack, you had John Cryer, Brad Pitt, Kiefer Sutherland, Nicolas Cage, and C. Thomas Howell. They all auditioned for the role of Glenn, including Jackie Earle Haley. Now, Jackie Earle Haley, in a weird twist of irony, he went on to play Freddy Krueger in the remake, but he initially auditioned for the role of Glenn in this film. He didn't get it, but his friend accompanied him to the audition, gave him a ride or something, and he was there waiting, and the producers looked over there at him and were like, who is he? Oh, that's my friend, he just came with me. Okay, well, since he's here, have him read this. And so he went ahead and read the lines and this, that, and the third, and he got cast. None other than Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp weren't even trying to be an actor. He beat out all of these top tier A-list stars that I named. Now, they weren't A-list stars then. I'm not crazy. I know that. But just look forward 40 years and you hear these names: Brad Pitt, Kiefer Sutherland, Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, and all this. I mean, come on. You're like, man, this is Hollywood royalty. But there's no named, not even there for that. he's essentially just the Uber driver. He just dropped off his friend and end up getting the role in this sought after horror film that everybody was going after. And once again, the world is better for it because Johnny Depp killed it. Really couldn't tell of his first movie. Actually, all of them. Now, granted, it's campy. It's campy as all get out. But people, it's 1984. You're not watching no horror films in 1984. Actually, you can probably lump in some dramas in 1984 that were seeking Academy Award consideration. They were just there for your entertainment purposes. And this definitely was that. But these were some really good performances. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as beloved as it is today. And so the rest of the cast rounded out, and we were off and running with this film, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. This supernatural slasher film written and directed by Wes Craven, produced by Robert Shane, and this is the first installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And when I say first installment, it's, I mean, insane that this went on to have multiple sequels and remakes and crossovers, and it was just bananas how this film turned into this phenomenon, all on a $1.8 million budget. And I don't know how inflation works. I don't know how to add all that up, how $1.8 million in 2024 money is, but I would imagine it's not super expensive. This was about as low budget can get. It was the first, well, at least one of the first movies produced by New Line Cinema, who had been at that point mostly distributing films, as a minor studio. It wasn't a big blockbuster film release type studio like Warner Brothers or Disney or Paramount and all that. This was during the era of straight to videos and all this other stuff. So it wasn't a huge studio. And so they were really banking on this film to do something, just to turn a profit, a little profit to keep the studio afloat, And off of that $1.8 million budget, the film went on to gross $57.1 million. And because of the success of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the studio, New Line Cinema, they earned the nickname The House That Freddy Built. And I think to this day, if New Line, I think New Line is still popping, not like it used to be. I know they merged with Warner Brothers, but when Warner Brothers do different projects, they'll kind of shift it over to New Line and stuff like that. But as far as it thriving and surviving for this long, it is because of A Nightmare on Elm Street. This film has a unique storytelling way as far as horror films are concerned, and it really changed horror films in the sense of the storytelling elements of it. The final girl, as is dubbed today, the final girl, the last survivor, and at the end of these horror films are normally introduced early. We know who they are, blah blah blah. And in this film, we're introduced to Tina, and Tina is the one who's fighting Freddy in her sleep and all this here. So initially you think she's the final girl. Her best friend is Nancy and all this here. She's telling her about all this and whatever. But once we get to the end of the first act, Freddy kills her. So it's like, wait, I thought she was the hero here, because nobody's believing her. Nobody is on her side. So you're like, okay, she's on this solo mission to destroy Freddy. And she dies, and you're like, well, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen? And it flips to Nancy being the final girl. It is so unique. It was a precursor to what Wes Craven later did with the Scream franchise. When you first watch Scream for the first time and Drew Barrymore, you get that opening scene and you're like, okay, because she's the only name in this movie, or at least the biggest name in this movie, she's the final girl. No, by the time that scene ends, so does Drew Barrymore. And that trope has been going on now in all horror films. There's nothing new and original about it anymore. But back then it was. And it was very, very jarring, watching that. And you're like, oh, my God, how are these kids going to survive now? She was the only one with the information and, and this, that, and the third. But the character of Nancy was so well written, and the story was so flushed out, well flushed out, I may add, that it all made sense. It wasn't just uh, I don't know, stupidly discovered. Now, now, don't get me wrong. It's it's 1984. It is campy. It is a low budget horror film. So yeah, a lot of corners were cut. I'm not saying that this was a Oscar contender for that year's Academy Awards by no stretch. I'm just saying that it was, for what it was well executed, and in the way that not Nancy, I'm sorry, Tina was disposed of in this movie. Once again, innovative in my eyes. Now, they've done this in films in the past when they take the set and they build the set to turn, and you don't know that as the watcher, the viewer. You're just looking at people flipping it like they're possessed or something. And they did it in this film, and it was the first time I've seen it, and I was in awe. And honestly, I'm a 45-year-old man now, and I still am amazed by that and wonder how did they do it. when Freddy Krueger was attacking her in her dream, it looked like Freddy Krueger is dragging her up the wall and up on the ceiling, and we're getting it from the point of view of her boyfriend on the floor. But all the while, he don't see Freddy, so it's like it's crazy that she's just levitating by herself. She's getting sliced up and all this here, all up the wall and on the ceiling, all in one take, and you're like, my God, what is happening here, sir? It was wild. It was wild and blew my mind. It still blows my mind to this day. Nancy taking over as the lead here was cool. Loved the performance. I love the performance by all of the kids, even though they're not kids to me. You know, they're much older than me, but in the context of the film, they did an exceptional job. Robert Englund, and I discovered this on a rewatch. I remembered the film. I know the film, but I wanted to get some, better clarity if we were going to talk about it. And so I rewatched it, and I'm like, I thought Freddy was funnier than this, because I remember Freddy being funnier, and then it dawned on me, it got sillier as the sequels went on. It was. It really turned into kind of a caricature of himself as the sequel. Every sequel going forward. Now I liked it because it was funny, it was humorous, but he was serious in this first film. Yeah, he was laughing and cackling, and maybe crack a joke, but it wasn't like the wink at the camera type jokes that he was doing in part 4, 5, 6, and all that. When he smashed somebody through the TV, oh, smile, you're on TV, and all that stupid stuff. I'm talking seriously. He was. You'll never see him as serious as you do in this film. Maybe in part 2. In part 2, actually, in part 3, that's where it started. But once again, part 3 did it better though. It wasn't campy, his humor. Then it turned campy. But anywho's, I just wanted to drop that little tidbit that he wasn't as humorous in the first film. He was really menacing. He was frightening. Another scene in here that will live in infamy for me was him in the alley stretching his arms to both sides of the alley. And once again, tore me up. Why I don't go into alleys. Why I don't do alleys to this day is because of Freddy Krueger. And that was a scene that was like, how did they do that? I'm telling you, this is 5-6-year-old Kevin. I don't know about visual effects and, practical arms and extending and, special machinery they used and all that. No, I'm invested into the world that Wes Craven built. This is how he wanted it viewed, and I viewed it in that in that regard. And so I didn't know, and it blew me away. I'm like, man, this dude can do anything. He can walk on walls. He can stretch his arms. He can invade your dreams. He's wearing a glove with knives at the end. I mean, this is one of the most vicious killers you can ever conceive. And how are they going to rid themselves of this evil? You know, that's the whole basics of this film. And I will get to the end in a few, but you know, all of the kills were kind of brutal. Now, Friday the 13th had his brutal kills. Halloween had his brutal kills, but it's something different about A Nightmare on Elm Street. Those kills seemed like every slash, every strangulation, every mutilation was just detailed vividly for your viewing pleasure. It wasn't for the gore factor, it wasn't to shock and awe, it was to show how vicious of a character Freddy Krueger was, forever will be. And it worked seamlessly in my eyes. I thought it was the perfect way to display this character. Let's not cheapen it. Let's not just show the character sleep and the next morning wake up, roll them over and they're dead. No, we need to see what's happening in the dreams. And this film does it just excellently. The greatest kill in film history. Yes, I'm saying it here, and I'm not speaking hyperbole. This was the greatest kill in film history. Now, I just went on this spiel about showing it. They didn't really show this, but they showed the aftermath and let your imagination do the work, and that's all. That's all they needed to do. It was ironically the death of Johnny Depp, and I don't know why I said ironically there, because the man's still alive and kicking. But it was Johnny Depp's character of Glenn, his death. Let me talk to the boys and girls in the audience for a second. Back in the day, we used to have, I never had one. I always wanted one because I thought that was special to have a water bed. They were water beds. It was like sleeping on water, I guess. I don't know. I never laid down in one, never slept in one, never had one. And so this was a thing. And so in this film, Glenn had a water bed. And he had one job. Cat Daddy had one job. His character, watch Nancy. Don't let her go to sleep. Well, he went to sleep. And he went to sleep on that water bed. Only to realize in his dream that Freddy's got him. And in our world, from our point of view, we see Freddy Krueger's arm come out of that water bed with the glove and snatch him down into the bed, dragging the television, the headset. And if you look at that shot, everything that he was watching or doing on that bed is your cell phone right now. He was watching TV, listening to music with his Walkman. He had what else he had on there? A stereo or something. He had all this stuff on his bed. And when I rewatched it, I was like, man, I got all of that right here in one hand right now. It was crazy. But anywho, yeah, all that sucked down with him. And so he starts screaming for his mom and blah, blah, blah. And there's a hole in the bed. His mom busts in, or mom and the dad, whoever, they bust in. And all of a sudden, out of that hole was gallons of blood. Gallons just. Now, how they pulled that shot off, they used the same set that they used with the Tina murder. You know, they just turned the set around. But they turned it upside down for this scene and just poured the water out, the dyed water, I guess, out of the hole, and just flipped it when they did the edit, so that it looks like it's coming out of the ground. And so that was just bananas, because that is no way possible. The human body only holds what, 6 pints of blood, or I forgot, but that was gallons. it was it was gallons of blood. Now I know it, you suspend disbelief. I know that a lot of that because the blood was mixed with the water and all that. I get all that, but look, once again, this is 5, 6 year old Kevin, man. Come on, man. I thought it was blood. I thought it was real. Like, man, how did he die? What did he do? What did he do? He grind them up or something? I mean, it was nothing but blood coming out of that hole. But it was brutal. It was brutal. I once again singed into my cerebellum forever. And we get to the end of this movie, and this is my only problem with the movie. It didn't end. The movie didn't end. At least that's what I'm led to believe. Is like, what happened at the end? How they vanquished her, or how Nancy vanquished Freddy Krueger, was so unsatisfying. It was so unsatisfying with the incantation and all this here. I just didn't like it. Now, granted, yeah, I get it. It was set up. They left a little nugget earlier in the film with her saying this and doing this to Freddy. I don't care. I didn't like it. I just didn't like it because there's still questions here, and then we get the scene at the very end with them driving off, and Nancy's mom get yanked through the little hole in the door by Freddy's arm, which was a cool effect, and the convertible that they're all in, the top is the color of Freddy's sweater, and they can't control the car, and it drives off, and that's the end of the film. And now, allegedly, Wes Craven hated that ending. The studio made him change the ending because they saw franchise. They saw sequel potential, and so they told him to change the ending, and so it can set up possible sequels. And boy, did it! But the original ending was going to be what we saw with the incantation and him turning into pixie dust or whatever, and and that was the end of the film. But despite that, even though endings of films will make and break a movie's enjoyment or quality level, not here. Not here, because we know that it did go on to have multiple sequels, 6 to be exact. 6 sequels. It had a TV show. It had a crossover film with Jason Voorhees. It had a remake. I mean, it was a phenomenon, and people to this day are still clamoring for another Elm Street film. Me being in that number as well, I would love to see another one if they do it right. If they do it right. Unfortunately, Wes Craven passed away a few years ago, so he won't be involved. But if you get the right people involved, I think you can pull it off. But will it be as good as the original? I doubt it, because A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984 gets a letter grade of an A+. It's a classic. It is a classic. It is one of the greatest horror films ever made. One of. I don't want to be taken out of context. Oh, you said that was the great. I didn't say that. I said it's one of the greatest horror films ever made, because it changed the genre in so many ways. It made a sub genre within a sub genre, and that's hard to pull off. Yet Wes Craven did it, and it lives It's been living and thriving for 40 years. Still holds up. Like I said, watched it the other day. Still holds up. Yeah, it is dated. It's 84-ish, but it still holds up story wise, acting wise, all that. I loved it. Still love it to this day. But yes, happy anniversary to A Nightmare on Elm Street. 40 years of glory. And I said earlier, November the 2nd. It's actually November the 9th that it was released in 1984. So we still in that bubble. We still good. 40 years. 40 years of greatness. I want to know, were you a fan or are you a fan of A Nightmare on Elm Street? Do you enjoy those films? Or are you clamoring for a sequel? And if you was doing a sequel or a remake, I should say, of A Nightmare on Elm Street, even though Robert Englund is still alive and well, I don't think he'll do it. He got to be about 80, huh? I don't know how old Robert Englund is, but anyways, if you was doing a remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street, who would you cast as Freddy Krueger? I mean, think hard, think long and hard. I would love to hear everybody's answer, because mine is pretty simple. Mine is actually a no-brainer, and I know 90% of y'all are gonna solely disagree with me, but honestly, it's a no-brainer to me who I would cast as Fred Krueger in a Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and that would be Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage, even though he's up there in age, but nobody said he had to be young, and he is. After seeing him in Long Legs, if you saw Long Legs, you would see it. And then I said it then, not even thinking about A Nightmare on Elm Street, but watching him in that film, it clicked in me. I was like, man, Nick could have made a really good Freddy. And I can see it. I can honestly see it. And now, I'm pretty sure there's other capable actors out there. You could probably put a unknown under that makeup, if they're good. But I'm just saying, off the top of my head, somebody who's known, if you're trying to sell the movie, yeah, I would say Nicolas Cage. And if that happens, I want my money. Give me my money. But I want to know your thoughts. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube. Like this video. Share this video with all your friends and family. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me on this retro review of the 40-year anniversary to a horror classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.